Hey, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to the first of what is going to be a series in the department explaining how your professors got to where they are, how they become professors at Memorial University. And so we're lucky enough to have Dr. Mark Berry, the department head, to give our first of these career seminar talks. So Dr. Berry is from Brighouse.
semi-detached bungalow, which not only had a front garden, it had a back garden as well that wasn't concrete, because this was the back garden in the original house. So that is very much the house I grew up in. So in England, school system's a little bit different. So the first school you go to is referred to as an infant school, which was this guy here, and you're there for the equivalent of kindergarten and grade 1. And then you transfer to what's referred to as junior school, and that's grade 2 through grade 5 in Canada speak. And that was the junior school I was at. It was unlike the 1800s infant school, which was actually directly opposite one of the old textile mills, which mysteriously burnt down shortly before it was due to close. There were 3 or 4 of them in a year, mysteriously burnt down shortly before they were due to close. But this was a nice new building. So that's where I did my junior school. And then in England, at that time, so end of grade 5, midway through grade 5, you wrote national exams. They were referred to as your 11 plus. And everybody had to write them. And based on what you did in those, you were either invited to go to a grammar school, or you went to what was referred to as a secondary modern. So secondary modern schools, generally, people only stayed there till 16. There were some where it was possible to stay on to 18. But for most people, if you ended up in a secondary modern and you wanted to go to university, at 16, you were going to have to transfer to another school, and there were very few spots available. So I wrote my 11 plus, like everybody did. Didn't pass it, but I was in the top number. So I was offered a place at this place, Hipperome Grammar School, and Hipperome Grammar School was an all-boys school. And that was very typical at the time. The grammar schools were either all boys or all girls. So in Brighouse, there were 2 all-boys grammar schools, Hipperome and Rastrick, and there was 1 all-girls grammar school, Brighouse Girls Grammar. So Hipperome Grammar School was actually established in 1648, and this is the one that Robert Peel is thought to have attended at some point. Not at the same time I was there, before anyone goes down that road. So this is a couple of the original buildings. Those, for undergrads that have visited me in my office, you'll see there is an old drawing there of the original school, and you can see these 2 buildings in there. Crest, school motto, Doctrina Fortoria Armis. Who knows what that is? Anyone? No one speaks Latin. Okay, so when we were at Hipperome, after your first year there, the top half, from the ones who got the top marks in French and German combined, because we all had to do French, we all had to do German, you had no choice, you had to take 2 years of Latin. The bottom half got to take 2 years of classical studies, which was basically Roman mythology, Greek mythology, which is what I wanted to take, but I wasn't allowed to, because I did too well in the French and German. Doctrina Fortoria Armis is the pen is mightier than the sword. That was the motto of the school. And so I was there from September 1979 to October 1984. So in June 1984, so at the end of what would be the equivalent of grade 10 here, you again write national exams. And these were referred to as your O levels. So this is your owls in Harry Potter speak. This is where all that came from. And at the time I was going through, this is where they were starting to transition over a little bit. So only grammar schools did O levels. The secondary modern schools did what became known as GCSEs. If you scored well enough on your GCSE, you got the equivalent of an O level. But GCSEs had lower grades. that you got. O levels, it was an A, B, C, fail. Whereas GCSEs, you could get those O level grades, and you'd also have 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s. So there was no fail in GCSEs. There were definitely fails in O levels. So I ended up with A's in biology, chemistry, French, and math, B's in English language and physics, and C's in English literature and history. So at the end of grade 8 in England, you had to pick 4 subjects that you were going to study for the next 2 years. Plus, you had to continue with math and English. You couldn't pick 4 sciences, you couldn't pick 4 humanities. There had to be at least one of the others in there. And everybody continued with English literature, English language, and math. And you did those for 4 years, and then you wrote these exams. So those were pretty decent grades. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot that one. So we also had school uniforms. So I believe that was me first day of school at grammar school. So, but what was life like in England during those times? Certainly in Yorkshire. Looking back, it was pretty grim. So the next few pictures are the major events that were going on during those years when I was at Hippodrome. So who knows who that is? Anyone? A really evil piece of human excrement. That is Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. So he murdered 13 people. I believe there was 1 in Manchester. All the others were in Bradford, Leeds, Halifax, Huddersfield. After he was caught, remember in the introduction, the flour mill, Sugden's flour mill, that is now the big climbing wall. It came out that, because he was a lorry driver, he was driving through my town on a weekly basis. The school I went to after Hippodrome, Crossley and Porter, one of his murder victims was found on the school playing fields. This was a huge, huge thing growing up in and around my area. If you want to know what it was like, I believe it's on Netflix. It's just come out. It's called The Long Shadow. There's a number of documentaries you can see about the Yorkshire Ripper. The Long Shadow focuses on the communities and the effect it had on the communities. One of the things it did do is it caused a massive spike in women's rights movements, especially on campuses, because the official police response was women should not go out at night. So that was fun. This wasn't so much around Yorkshire, but in England, in those early 80s, there were an awful lot of race riots, or what we refer to as the race riots. This is one of the biggest ones was in London, in Brixton. There was an awful lot of social unrest with the race riots going on. There was obviously a huge amount of unrest at soccer games. There was mass hooliganism at soccer. Then this is the National Front, which were a neo-Nazi fascist party that actively recruited at social events. At soccer games, they'd be outside schools handing out pamphlets. So there was a huge, huge extreme right-wing movement kicking off, which obviously fueled a lot of these issues here. And then there was the miners' strike, which lasted for 18 months. And the miners' strike, so remember I said Barnsley was about 30 miles away? So around my area wasn't coal mines. Barnsley was all coal mines and in and around that area. And this went on for 18 months. And it got really nasty. There was concrete slabs being thrown at cars off of motorway overpasses. This was absolutely brutal. And of course, there was the IRA and the bombings of hotels, pubs. This was a famous one in London where the big horse parade, Queen's Regiment parade was going on, and they basically blew up the horses. This was a public coach. This is one of the main motorways, the motorway that actually runs through my hometown. That was blown up by the IRA on the motorway. So this was a huge, there was an awful lot of turmoil growing up. And of course, we had this wonderful person who we just will not talk about. Yeah, let's move on. Other than to say, that's probably the main reason I'm in Canada, because she absolutely devastated the universities, completely and utterly. But it was good for music. When you get social unrest, you get lots of good music coming through. Initially, the punk scene, before the fascists co-opted it and took it over with the skinhead bother boots boys. I very deliberately put this one in here. This is X-Ray Specs. The lead singer, Polystyrene, was a Somali refugee. The original punk movement was very much about women's rights and minority rights and everybody being equal until it got co-opted. And then you had various iterations of post-punk with two-tone ska, psychobilly, and the re-emergence of mods. So there were some good things. It wasn't all dreary. Sorry? I did not have a school to know. I know people who did. So for me, very much that working men's culture, hanging out in snooker halls, pool halls, lawn bowling was the big thing that I got into as a kid. And looking back, I was actually really good at it and didn't realize. I had a bit of a speech impediment growing up, and in today's speak, I was bullied at school a lot. I was also at an all-boys school. I'm not exactly big. You know, so the sports and the culture there of, you know, you don't show emotion. You're playing sports at schools and you're going up against 6-foot gorillas who've been shaving and have full beards when you're 11 or 12. I didn't have a lot of confidence, in all honesty. But I was actually really good at this, to the point that at one of the working men's clubs, I was made first team captain when I was 19 of the bowling team. And I believe that's one of the team competitions that we won. And yes, I really did have hair that long for quite a long time. So what was my plan? The plan was do A-levels, so these are the ones that you do at 18, and to get 3 Bs, because I wanted to go to med school. And the aim was to go to a med school as far away from home as possible, because that's what you did in England. You did not live at home at university. You got as far away as possible. And what was the backup plan? I didn't have one initially. And then as I was applying for med schools while I was doing my A-levels, it was kind of beaten into me at school that, no, you've got to have a backup plan. So I eventually settled on pharmacy. And to get into pharmacy, basically, I was going to need 1 B and 2 Cs at A-level. So those were things that seemed eminently achievable. So I changed school. Even though I was at a grammar school, I ended up changing school. The reason I changed school is Mid-80s, Thatcher and her government were trying to force the closure of all the grammar schools and force everything into comprehensives. And the school I was at said they weren't going to be part of that. And the response from the government was, fine, if you're not part of it, any teachers that don't refuse to leave will be blackballed and will never work for the education department again. So right at the start of my A-levels, we literally didn't know if we were going to have teachers and for how long we were going to have any teachers. So I changed school to Crossley and Porter, which was in Halifax, which was another grammar school, but this was a mixed grammar school. Women! That was very exciting as a 16-year-old. So established again in 1500s, 1585. This is Crossley and Porter School. See this big field in the back here? That's called Savile Park, but it doubled as the school playing ground. I'll come back to that. Because this is Josephine Whitaker, and she was the 10th murder victim of the Yorkshire Ripper. That is the official police photo. Those buildings in the back are some of the outbuildings at Crossley and Porter School. This was also the major turning point in the Ripper inquiry, because Josephine Whitaker was 19 and came from a very well-to-do family. Even the 1980s police couldn't portray her as a prostitute. And this was really the turning point that, no, this wasn't about bad, dirty women being killed. Its motto, Omni Bonum Ab Alto, all good things come from above. So you can see what the background of that school originally was. And so I did my A-levels and absolutely bombed them spectacularly. Ended up with a B in general studies, which was the only thing you didn't study for at all. And the three that I supposedly did study for, I ended up with D's in. And that was chemistry, math, and physics. That wasn't getting me into university. Certainly wasn't getting me into med school. So I ended up here, Sunderland Polytechnic. So polytechnics, these were basically, at that time, they were largely regarded as pseudo-universities. They were the universities for the people who were too dumb to go to real university, pretty much. So where's Sunderland? So I've got Leeds just down here, so remember I'm from here. Sunderland is up here in the northeast. So this was about 120 miles away from home, which in England is a long way. I know it's just down the street here, but remember, in North America, 100 years is a long time. In England, 100 miles is a long distance. So I was there 3 years, did a BSc honours in pharmacology. And in all honesty, when I started, I had no idea what pharmacology was. I knew it had something to do with drugs. I knew it was somehow different from pharmacy, but I had really no idea what it was. And I ended up with what's referred to as an upper second class degree, or a 2-1. So your degrees in England, first class, upper second, lower second, third. So generally, anything second class and above was good enough to get into grad school if you wanted to go that route. And basically, 6 weeks in, I realized that this is what I actually wanted to do. It wasn't medicine, it was this. So that's actually the old pharmacology building in Sunderland, at Sunderland University. So what does a British degree look like? This is going to shock some of you. It was free. No tuition fees. And depending on the income of your parents the year before, you got a grant. That was just for you, August. So it was £1,500. Doesn't sound like a lot. I did the math on it, and the inflation calculation, and then converted it into 1924 pounds and Canadian dollars, that's about $9,500 to $10,000 a year. Not a huge amount, but enough to pay your rent, and meant that if you worked over the summer and saved a bit of money, you weren't going to be in debt going to university, or certainly not a lot of debt. No electives. You knew exactly what you were taking on day one for the next 3 years and when you were taking it. And you all took it together. So you had a cohort going through as a class, which was actually a really good thing. So 3 years, all programmed, and your degree consisted of 900 marks in total. 500 of those marks were on 5 exams that you sat at the end of your 3rd year on successive days, 100 each. That could cover anything in the 3 years. You had 200 for your honours thesis, which also included, there was the honours thesis, and then we had some 4 weeks of design your own labs that went into that 200 marks. And 200 on your 2nd year grades, which was a combination of exams, and basically you had to write a review paper. And I forget what they actually call it. And then right after that, you had to do an oral viva, an oral exam with external examiners. For some people, it really didn't matter. If you were solidly in a grade boundary, it really didn't matter. But if you were on a boundary, that viva could mean the difference between going up and coming down. And that was a 30 to 45-minute oral exam. Again, it could cover absolutely anything. So I would like to say that's how most of those 3 years were spent studying. Yeah, probably 50% of it was spent like that. And Paul would kill me if he knew I'd put this picture up. That was a really famous day after. But yes, it was a very unique group of us that were together, and we just all got along really well, and we knew where the boundaries were. We flirted with them an awful lot, but it was very much a work hard, play hard mentality. And yeah, so we spent an awful lot of time in these 2 particular establishments. Yeah, the library. So my honours degree was on the anticholinergic effect of tricyclic antidepressants. And it was supervised 80% by Dr. Stephen Please and 20% by Donald Wheatman, who everybody called Max, which sounds a little bit of a weird breakup. That's because Steve Please was supposed to be my supervisor, and about 3 weeks into the writing up period, he committed suicide with an overdose of heroin that he had just got from the Home Office for his research purposes. So basically, I'd completed all my thesis, was writing up, and had to switch over to a supervisor who hadn't been involved at all. So what did this involve? An awful lot of organ bath work. So basically a little piece of guinea pig ilium strung up in an organ bath and measuring contractions. And you did them on these things, these chymographs, which was basically a rotating drum, and you had paper that was smoked. So you had charcoal all over it, and you'd have a lever that measured the responses and etched them into the charcoal. And then at the end, you'd take that smoked paper off, and you had to run it through varnish to basically make it permanent. And you very quickly worked out that you had to have your tracers facing upwards. Because if they were facing down, you scraped them all off and your entire day was wasted. You also had to remember to mark on the smoke in that charcoal when you were adding things and what you were doing exactly, because you had nowhere to mark on once you varnished it. So you ended up with a whole host of these tracers, which for my thesis, I then had to cut out and trace round to put into the thesis, the results. So those of you who are complaining about how difficult Prism is to use or GraphPad is to use, just be a little bit thankful. So our graduating class. So we all made it through. This is, well, that's me. This is Paul Worley, who was referred to as Wobbs, Michael Davis, Paul Newbold, who you saw in the previous photo, and Michael Sinclair. So of that graduating class, Paul is currently compound development team leader in the States at Janssen Pharmaceuticals for immunology. He actually, post-graduating, went into industry, paid off some of his debts, then came back, did a PhD, and eventually worked his way up in pharmaceutical industry. Mick is a senior vice president for global sales at Savoda, which is a clinical trials company. Mick did a PhD, then did a postdoc, realized that that wasn't for him, went into pharmaceutical sales. You leveraged that experience and actually got right out of the pharma business and was doing global sales for various other companies, worked his way through to up to vice president level, and has now come back to more pharma related. Wobbs is currently a senior technical expert, again at a pharma company. So in the degree, at the end of your first year, if you hadn't passed the exams, you had to come back in the summer and rewrite them. Wobbs was one of those people. He nearly got kicked out of the program. He had to rewrite his first year exams to stay in the program. So there is hope. Nina, this is Nina. Nina was an eye-opener when I went to university, because in those days, women only drank half pints. And Nina not only drank full pints, she went pint for pint with all the boys, even though she was 4 foot nothing. She's now a farm owner or manager, farm manager in Australia. But she actually started off in the pharma companies, realized it wasn't for her when she got married, emigrated out to Australia, and now runs a farm. A couple of other examples. Some of you may know this person, Ma Hussein Gambles. Any of you who took the first year course with Dr. Harding and myself 2 or 3 years ago, Ma was one of the people we brought in for an external panel. Ma has an MBE, and that is, so she, again, went into industry, eventually got a PhD, but when she was pregnant, started her own company out of her house. And this was the company, Sarf Pure Skincare, and it was the world's first organic and halal certified skincare. And she got the MBE for services to halal compatible cosmetics. But this is how I always remember Ma. Ma was, she was an Afghani refugee into Pakistan, and then a refugee from Pakistan into England. But Ma hung out in all of the pubs that the locals were in that students really weren't welcome in with the bikers. And I know Ma would not have any problem at all with me sharing this picture, but this is how I always knew Ma and remember Ma. She was a very solid 2-2, and she's probably ended up being the most successful of any of us, depending how you measure success. Mike Sinclair went into scientific writing. We all lost contact with Mike within a year of graduating, which was when he came out as gay. And in 1980s England, many gay people felt that once they came out as gay, they had to cut ties with everybody else. Mike Davis is from the same hometown, and Sinky didn't even maintain contact with any of his family. He just cut ties with everybody when he came out as gay. Again, if you're interested in what the gay community was like in England in the 80s, It's a Sin is a 6-part series that came out actually during the... Has anybody seen it? God, people. It came out during the pandemic. It's absolutely wonderful. Watch it. It's available online. Very, very, very good. Philippa Guy ended up being a career image life coach, but again, she initially went into pharma industry, realized it wasn't for her, leveraged that experience to set up her own company. And Lizzie Scarr ended up being a vet. Very late in life. She was in her 50s when she went back to vet school. She was actually a prof in Australia and then just got fed up with academia and decided to become a vet. So I did my PhD at University of Saskatchewan. There. And in the late 80s, it really was that isolated Saskatchewan. How did I end up there? Every Friday, we used to go down to the train station and pick up a copy of New Scientist, because in the back of New Scientist were all the job ads. And they were advertising for someone to do neuropharmacology, psychopharmacology. Threw in an application and completely forgot about it. And then suddenly got a letter several months later saying, yeah, we'll take you, come over. And I really wasn't sure whether I wanted to go. But a couple of the guys from the Working Men's Club, I was chatting to them, and they said, well, why wouldn't you? Go. If you don't like it, no one's going to hold that against you. So I went. Ended up doing a PhD in neuropsychiatry in the neuropsychiatry research unit. Interesting little unit, this. So it was affiliated with the university. Strictly speaking, it was part of the Department of Psychiatry, but it operated completely independently. It essentially provided the Department of Psychiatry with its basic research, and the Department of Psychiatry provided the unit with access to the university. My stipend was $11,500. That's in 1989. If you do that conversion, that's about $24,500 right now. And this was before everybody started charging differential fees for international students. So that was actually a reasonable amount of money. My PhD, so this is the building that it was in. My PhD, oh sorry, for those of you who don't know, Saskatoon at all, very pretty campus, probably one of the prettiest campuses in Canada, but bitterly cold in the winter. So my first winter there, my first Christmas, the air temperature did not get above -40 the entirety of Christmas week. And at -40, it doesn't matter whether you're talking Celsius or Fahrenheit, because it's the same number. That was air temperature. With wind chill, it was -75. I did not come out of my basement for an entire week. And it was like, I don't care if they fire me and kick me out of the program. This isn't safe. You do eventually get used to it. But my PhD was on this, the neuromodulatory effects of 2-phenylthalamine and dopaminergic neurons. And Alec Patterson was my supervisor. Not going to go into this, but these are the compounds. So they're basically very similar to your monoamine neurotransmitters, but they're missing a ring hydroxyl. And the synthetic pathways are exactly the same. And this was great. That entire unit all worked on these compounds. There was an analytical chemist in there, there was a synthetic chemist, there were biochemists, there were enzymologists, and they were all working on these compounds. So it was really nice. Alec was a great supervisor. He let you get on with it, he showed you how to do it, let you get on with it. And then just after I graduated, I realized why he let you get on with it. Because he'd disappear, like, and you wouldn't be able to find him. And it was because he was an undiagnosed depressive. And he had major depression. And he tried to commit suicide twice during my PhD. So at this point, I'm starting to take things a little bit personal. This is 2 consecutive supervisors. But Alec, eventually, he accepted the diagnosis, was getting treatment, and then was diagnosed with metastatic cancer and died at 38. But what sorts of things was I doing? I was measuring individual neuron activity in rat brains, treating them with dopamine agonists and these compounds, and you would see a potentiation of the effects of the dopamine compound. We use deprenol, which inhibits the breakdown of these, to show that you saw the same sorts of effects with the endogenous phenylethylamine. Then this compound here inhibits the synthesis of phenylethylamine. So responses would remain potentiated till you inhibited its synthesis, and then they suddenly return back to normal again. So this was all good, but nobody believed this. Nobody believed trace amines was real, and you would literally get grant applications back saying, everybody knows this isn't real. And so the entire unit, just after I graduated, had to switch focus because no one could get funded. They would not entertain funding for trace amines at all. I put this one up just for the E&R crowd, 4232. After showing the effects of phenylethylamine, then went in to study the details of the receptor interactions because there was no known receptor for them. So we were looking to see if it interacted or altered dopamine receptor responses. And at that time, you had a choice, D1 receptors or D2 receptors. D1 receptors had cleaner reagents available, so I chose D1 receptors. And so absolutely nothing. Lots of overlapping curves. 10 years later, when the trace amine receptors were identified, came out, they were interacting with D2 receptors. Yeah. Having completed that, went to the Ohio State University, because apparently that's what we've got to say, to do my postdoc in Columbus, Ohio, best known for its Horseshoe Stadium in college football. For 2 years in the Department of Pharmacology, under the supervision, supposedly, of Dr. Norton Neff, but it was as much his wife, Dr. Maria Hadjiconstantinou. And yes, we're just going to say the less said about this 2 years, the better, because this was an outright abusive lab. Ohio State had regulations that married couples could not be in the same department. So officially, Norton was the head of the pharmacology department, and Maria was in the Department of Psychiatry. Her lab was in the Department of Pharmacology, and they co-supervised everybody. And she was outright abusive. She would yell at students in lab meetings. She would brag about how when she was a postdoc, she dressed in short skirts and tight outfits to seduce Norton to leave his wife. She would share details of their sex life in lab meetings. She would scream at people. We were measuring enzyme activity of AADC, and every person in the lab would get a different value. It was consistent for them, but everyone would get a different value. You had to take all your data to Maria, and she would apply a multiplication factor and change your data to what she believed the true value was supposed to be. Yeah, that was a lot of alcohol for 2 years. And so I ended up with no publications. Eventually, one came out 4 years after I'd left, which left me in a real mess because I now had a complete dud of a postdoc and unable to get any positions anywhere. Luckily, the unit that I'd done my PhD in said they'd take me back because they liked me. And so Alan Bolton, who was the head, took me back. And by now, they'd switched to looking at anti-apoptotic compounds for neurodegeneration and neural rescue compounds. So I did a second postdoc there, basically looking at various things, working on preventing cell death. I got to supervise a PhD student And interesting link to here, the fruit flies that we were using were ones that Dr. Staveley developed in his postdoc. And then that was all going really well. And we had compounds that actually appeared to be neurorescue agents. So Alan Bolton started his own company. We spun off a pharma company. I was the first employee of the company, Alviva Biopharmaceuticals. Looking at small molecule neurorescue agents, started late 1998 as a senior research scientist, eventually became head of one of the units there, and ultimately senior scientific officer. Everything was going great. We had a licensing agreement with Schwarz Pharma in Germany. And then in 2001, summer 2001, the German government changed the licensing laws for drugs. And that meant that every single German pharma company dropped their entire preclinical research programs. And we were one of those. And then in September 2001, what happened? 9/11. And every market crashed. And we could not get funding for love or money anywhere. We managed to keep things going for 2 to 3 years. We'll just skip right over that. I realize I've prattled on for far too long. For 2 years, and then the company closed. It had to shut down end of July 2003. I got married August 2nd, 2003. Great wedding present. My wife had a joint custody arrangement from previous contestant. Wasn't able to leave Saskatoon. So I was looking for jobs in Saskatoon. Couldn't get any because I've got a dud of a postdoc and I've just spent 5 years in industry with only review articles for publications because everything was a trade secret. Could not get a job. So I spent an entire year unemployed. Just as my POGI was running out, I applied for a position at Brandon University. It was a tenure track position and they declared it a failed search. And then phoned me and said, oh, would you be willing to be considered for a teaching term? A 1-year teaching term. Which point the second word in that answer was yes. But managed to, after that 1-year teaching term, they agreed to make it a tenure track appointment. So this is where Brandon is, here. Remember, Saskatoon's up here. 5 hours, 35 minutes, door to door, drive. My wife's still in Saskatoon because of the joint custody. 10 years. I did that. Managed to get up to full professor. I was department head for 3 years. And that is what allowed me to leverage the application for here. The fact that I'd got the department head and I managed to get some NSERC funding. So life at Brandon, in the chemistry department, we had a grand total of 4 faculty to deliver an entire chemistry program. Everyone was responsible for teaching 6 courses a year and any labs that were associated with those courses. There was no lab staff help. So you didn't get a lot of time for research. There was no grad program at Brandon. So you had to try and get adjunct appointments. I'd actually, the one in the Toxicology Research Center, I got because I'd applied for a director position there, an assistant director position, made the final 2. They liked me, but offered it to the other one, and they agreed to give me an adjunct appointment, which at least allowed me to get some grad students. Brandon had its labor relations issues. The collective agreement expired twice during my 10 years there. Both ended up in a strike. The second one is the second longest in Canadian history at the university. 10 to 11 weeks. I forget the exact time period. But what I did was I took what we'd been doing in the company and put a little bit of a different spin on it. So we started looking at some of these neural rescue compounds, but were they able to prevent the toxicity associated with chemotherapeutics? So one of the models we were using was basically chemotherapy-induced alopecia. The way you do this is you take your little mice and you wax them, literally. Those of you who go to beauty salons, that's what you do. It raised eyebrows with students when they came in and you've got all these tubs of wax in your eyes, like, what the hell is going on in here? But what we were able to see was that some of these neural rescue compounds prevented the toxicity of cyclophosphamide, of chemotherapeutics, but they didn't appear to prevent the chemotherapeutics from killing cancer cells. So there was something weird going on there. And then while I was there, the trace amine receptors were discovered. And so I went back to the trace amines again and started playing around with some cheap, because I didn't have any money, trace amine work, initially looking at how they cross cell membranes. Managed to leverage through a grad student, through the adjunct appointment, got an NSERC. When I took over as head, I'll just skip through these because they're not relevant. When I took over as head, the reason I took over as head at Brandon was the previous head was on long-term disability, cancer again. And the person who should have taken over, remember there's only 4 of us, would have been an absolute disaster. And everyone agreed they would. And I was next in line, so it's like, okay, I'll be head. Woo. And decided that if I'm going to do it, then I'm going to do it right. So we ripped apart the program. The program at Brandon at that point consisted of General Chemistry 1, General Chemistry 2, Organic 1, Organic 2, Organic 3, Organic 4, Phys-Chem 1, Phys-Chem 2. Those were literally the names of the courses. And we wondered why we only had 7 majors. So we ripped that apart, taught the same stuff, but put a much different focus on it. Very aggressive recruitment of first years, and started really building up the student society, having awards nights, creating more of a culture around the department of somewhere where people wanted to be. And we also recognized that the vast majority of students didn't want to be chemists. They wanted to go to med school, or vet, or dentistry, or law. So we tried to make the programs, you still taught the same thing, but tried to make it relevant to those careers. And we tripled in 3 years, we tripled the number of majors. And this is Brian Hill here, who some of the faculty may remember from the management intransigence period that was here last year. Brian was very much my partner in crime in ripping the department apart and rebuilding it. But that enabled me to leverage the application here. And why people offered me the job here, I asked Dr. Christian, she was on the search committee, or Dr. Brown, or Dr. Chima. But yes, for some reason they gave me the position here, ended up here, and that was it. Yeah, basically, now stuck with me. We started doing things like having Pioneer Prof Days as charity fundraisers. That started getting attention in the local newspapers and started the outreach stuff. So I realize I've gone on way, way, way too long. So I will leave it there. If anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to ask. Probably wasn't what any of you were expecting. But yeah, that's basically how I ended up stood here today. So yeah, done.
There are a couple questions out there if any undergrads or grad students have questions.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I have 2 questions for you.
Yep.
Okay, choose the best one. Okay. If you could do it all over again, what will you do differently?
What would I do differently? Not go to Ohio State University and the NEFs in a very short statement. Because, yeah, that essentially, if it hadn't been for Alan Bolton, that would have entirely sunk my career. So, yeah, I would not have done that. That would be the big thing. The other stuff I wouldn't have changed. Sunderland Poly ended up being, in my third year there, it was all the programs were ranked by industry employers, and it was ranked the third best pharmacology program in England, higher than Oxford. When we were applying when we were applying for jobs, we had about an 80% interview rate. So 80% of applicants from anyone in our program were getting interviews. It was sheer dumb luck that I ended up there. But yeah, I wouldn't have changed that. The Ohio State is the one that I would have changed.
Hi, Dr. Barry. Thanks for your presentation. I have a very scientific question. So, in your opinion, what was the best, the best English rock band? Not the greatest, not the greatest, the best, yeah.
Best English rock band, oof. I would probably have to go with, for longevity, I would go with Queen. Yeah. And close second would be The Jam. Going back to the mod stuff.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Barry. I noticed you said you wanted to go to med school. What motivated you to attend med school? And then when you didn't get into med school, how did you feel? And are you happy with your present career right now?
Is the dean here? How did I feel? In all honesty, I probably knew halfway through my A-level studies that I wasn't getting in. I just was too stubborn to accept it and wasn't willing to be honest with myself. So it wasn't, I certainly knew after I'd written the exam that I wasn't getting in. So it wasn't a great shock in all honesty. Yeah, I enjoy what I do. I don't like a lot of the politics and the crap that goes along with it. I enjoy what I do here. But I also enjoyed my time in industry. But they're two very different things, and they have positives and negatives. I get to do what I want here, research-wise. In industry, you don't get to do that. In industry, you may work on a project for 5 years, go into work one morning, and you're told, that's it, it's done, we're not doing that anymore. So there's positives and negatives. I will say that the biggest thing that helped me for academia, and I know I skipped over it, was when I was back in Saskatoon postdoc in industry, I did coaching. I was doing a lot of coaching, and I did my coaching certifications with the 3M national program, and was at the level of my next step would have been to do my B license. I got more out, I learned more from that that's been useful for teaching than I've learned at any teaching and learning session I've done in academia. The coaching and those programs, because they didn't assume any knowledge. A lot of the teaching and learning stuff, there's jargon associated with some of it, and they assume a basic knowledge. And this really taught you from the ground, you don't know anything, this is the sorts of things you do, this is how you plan things. That's probably been the biggest help to me with respect to teaching.
Well, thank you, Dr. Barry. Very impressive speech. And my question is, have you ever feel regret about choosing academic as your career? Because having a PhD and a postdoc for 4 years plus 4 years, and still having trouble finding a job,
Oh, hell yeah. When I was unemployed, yeah. when you see the salaries you get in industry compared to what you get in academia, yeah, you're gonna feel envious.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But you also have the added freedom. You know, I didn't show it here. I've been to Russia. I've been to Japan. I've been to China. All because of research I was doing in academia. Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do that anywhere in any other career. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, there are times when you regret it and you think, what the hell am I doing? And you just have to try and maintain balance. Yeah, and when you have the crappy times, try and remember, yeah, well, maybe it isn't quite as bad as it seems. Yeah, here are some of the benefits, and yeah, it evens out. When it really comes down to it, it's a job. It's a job, and very few jobs are enjoyable all the time. You know, it's just, you know, are there more enjoyable parts than non-enjoyable parts? And mostly there are.
I'm going to cut off the questions there because we're quite a bit over time. But if anyone else has questions, I'm sure Dr. Berry would be happy to talk to you about those questions. I'd like to invite everyone again to thank Dr. Berry for his wonderful talk today.